Welcome back. We just spent some time exploring the Azure AI Studio and what functionality we have within this platform. So, how we can deploy models and then leverage them in these playgrounds so we can start to explore what kind of prompts to give the models in order to achieve the solution we're looking for. If you didn't have a chance to watch the video where we covered all of that, it'll be in the description so you have a bit more context of where we are now. Now, we're back in the completions playground, and we're taking a look at the initial prompt, an example that I'd given the model before. And the use case, like I'd mentioned, is an application that is a greeting assistant. If we path over to what we currently have for this, Clippy's back and Clippy's here, ready to greet you all. So if we pass in the name and a job title, it'll return back a greeting. So I passed in CEO, Chief Happiness Officer. If I do the same and say I'm something like a chef, it's coming back with something that says fix it aller. That doesn't really work. So it's clear that my application hasn't been set up to scale for all of these different types of job titles out there. So it's a really good solution that I can leverage the model for. Now that we have all of this information in here between the text and the parameters over here on the side, I could take a snapshot of this and actually view it as code. So anytime I need to rerun this model or configure this type of parameters, I have that available to me here. And it's available in a couple of different languages. In this case, I have a Python application. We have C Sharp. There's some options available for you there. So this is really a snapshot of what I have. You'll see down here it has the prompt and the examples that I'd given it, along with the engine. So that's the underlying model that this is going to reach out to, and the parameters. A couple of other things we'll need in order to use this model, the endpoint and the key. So within here, the key is how we are going to be able to authenticate and reach out to the model. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and see if we can get this running locally. If we take a look at the application as it is itself, you can see where these limitations lie. Right now, I'm just doing a generic lookup into this dictionary to see if the job title is matching something that I have in here. And I could theoretically use GitHub Copilot and come in here and it'll give me some suggestions and I could sit here and do this forever, but that's not really a great use of my time. So instead, let's see how we can get the model working within our code. Now, I simply copy and pasted everything we had over there. For me, I need to load my environment variables in a slightly different way. And I have already loaded this API key into my environment variable file here. So I'm going to go ahead and load these environment variables and see what happens. This is taking, again, the prompt and all of the parameters and everything that I'd configured before. So let's see what, if anything, comes back when we run this. Awesome. It looks like we did get an object back from the model. If we look at some of the details in here, we can see that there are choices where I would expect, something useful to come back with, but my text is empty. So if we think about this for a second, we actually didn't prompt the model to do anything in this scenario. We merely copy and pasted the prompt that it had already answered. So we can see that we already have the greetings for Charles in there. So let's try to take that out and see what happens whenever we just pass in Charles, an accountant. Let's go ahead and clear the console and run it again. Now we can see that, within our choices, here's the text coming back. So that's awesome. That's the material that we'll need. That's what we're going to pass into this function to pull out and make our application a little bit more scalable. The first thing I do want to do, though, is actually format the response. So in this case, we're going to be pulling back choices. Yeah, great job, GitHub Copilot. Thank you for that. So we know this is working. We know we're pulling back the correct information. Let's go ahead and turn this into a function that we can call from our application. I'm going to call this function ask, and it's going to take in a name and the title of the job. We'll go ahead and use the same information, but we don't want, again, Charles to be here. This is where we are going to pass in part of the prompt. So we get within here, can do a couple of different things, but just for the sake of readability, I'm going to pull this out and set it as a variable, call this initial prompt. And we're effectively going to be adding what our user is inputting to the end of this prompt, and that's what will be sent to the model. So in this case, will be the initial prompt, and then we'll pass in the name. In this case, I've formatted things to be a dash, and then we'll pass in title. So yeah, let's wrap this in some parentheses. Now we're going to return this response with all the information in there. So we should be good on this front. Let's go ahead and go to our application where we're typically doing this. Where before we were creating what was called a joke, we had this create joke function that we were running, and that was doing the dictionary lookup. So instead of that, let's pull in ask. And instead of this, we again have our name and title here coming from the form that we've sent in. So let's go ahead and pull that in here. Instead, we're going to call joke from that ask function that we just created and have the name and title within there. So let's try to run it and see what happens. We pull up our Clippy app again, and let's try something with Charles being a chef. Oh, awesome. So here you're chef. How exciting. So we have already implemented really just that easily put that into our application. I need to do a little bit of formatting. In this case, my HTML is adding a little bit of stuff that it doesn't really need to anymore. So we'll remove the hello. We'll path back the just sending the joke back. So let's go ahead and rerun this. And we'll say JD. How about a crane operator? Oh, and we get a server error. So you typically might run into this, especially as you are trying these things out. There are rate limits to each model that you have. So you will likely get an error message similar to this saying that you have exceeded your token rate limit. So just be aware as you are testing things out. It's giving me a timer of when I do count down before I can call it again. So just be aware that that will likely happen and something to be aware of. You have other ways of scaling out things depending on the pricing tier and depending on the configuration that you've set up with that. So I think it's probably been about 22 seconds. So let's go back and see if we can try it again. And it's taking a second. And there we go. So this model really easily implemented within here. We're able to pull things in very simply. Again, I didn't really make any modifications to this code that was already pulled out that we already had. We're taking a snapshot of this. We are having some information that we've tried out in the playground. We have a pretty good understanding of what's going to be happening there and the ability to really easily integrate this and have it working in our application. So hope this gave you a little bit of insight into how you can begin to think about what models you would want to create, how you can create them, and then also how you can start to implement them into some applications. So let us know if you have any questions or if there's anything else we can help with. But thank you so much.